Status report. Commander Elena Rodriguez's voice cut through the chaos on the Stellaris bridge as another system crashed. Dr. Sarah Chen's fingers flew across her console, trying to maintain their connection to the quantum array. It's not just Earth, Commander. The entire Sol system has gone dark. No signals, no quantum pings, nothing. The research vessel Stellaris hung in the void at the edge of known space, its sensors straining against the unusual silence. They'd been monitoring the strange communications blackout from Earth for the past 12 hours. But this was different. This was wrong. Get me anything you can, Rodriguez ordered, her weathered face illuminated by the red emergency lights. Even background radiation readings would help. Sarah nodded, recalibrating the quantum array for the third time. The technology was experimental, capable of detecting communications across vast distances by exploiting quantum entanglement. It had never failed them before. The bridge crew worked in tense silence, broken only by the soft beeping of instruments and the occasional curse as another attempt at contact failed. Sarah was about to suggest a full system restart when her console erupted in a cascade of alerts. Commander, her voice cracked with disbelief. I'm picking up a signal, but this can't be right. Rodriguez was at her station in 3 quick strides. What are we looking at? It's from Earth, but the timestamp. Sarah double-checked her readings. It's dated 300 years in the future. The bridge fell silent. Even the ship's ambient hum seemed to quiet at this impossibility. Play it, Rodriguez ordered after a long moment. Sarah's hands trembled as she initiated the decode sequence. The quantum array hummed to life, processing the impossible transmission. Just as the first bits of data began streaming through, a massive energy wave slammed into the Stellaris. The ship lurched violently. Crew members were thrown from their stations as systems failed across the board. Emergency lights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. In the black void, Sarah could hear the ship's hull groaning under immense stress. Backup power, Rodriguez shouted. Get me emergency systems. Seconds stretched into eternal darkness before dim red lights sputtered to life. Sarah pulled herself back to her station, ignoring the blood trickling from a cut on her forehead. Her console was still functioning, running on its own backup power. The message, she whispered, realizing it had completed downloading before the wave hit. It's ready to play. Rodriguez helped their navigator back to his feet. Everyone who can move, get to damage control stations. Dr. Chen, let's hear it. The message crackled through the bridge speakers, distorted but clear enough to understand. A woman's voice, tired and determined. We killed our son. Find the others. They're hunting us all. Before anyone could speak, Sarah's console lit up with new alerts. Commander, the stars. They rushed to the forward viewport, their personal lights illuminating the reinforced plexiglass. Outside, in the infinite black of space, stars were flickering. Not the normal twinkle of distant suns seen through an atmosphere, but deliberate patterns. On, off, like binary code written in starlight. Get me visual enhancement, Rodriguez ordered. Maximum magnification on the nearest stellar anomaly. The viewport's heads-up display activated, focusing on a star about 2 light-years distant. As they watched, its light dimmed, brightened, then dimmed again in a perfect sine wave pattern. That's not natural, Sarah said, her scientific mind racing through possibilities. Stars don't behave like that. Not without. Her voice trailed off as she noticed something else in her readings. The energy wave that had hit them. It wasn't dissipating like a normal stellar phenomenon. It was circling back. Commander, we need to move. Now. Rodriguez didn't hesitate. Engineering, give me whatever power you can. Navigation, plot us a course away from that wave, maximum thrust. The Stellaris engine sputtered to life as the crew raced against time. Sarah watched her readings in horror as the wave approached, its energy signature now clearly visible. It wasn't just a wave, it had structure, purpose, intelligence. As they accelerated away from the phenomenon, Sarah copied the future transmission to her personal database. Something had happened to Earth, would happen to Earth, and that message was their only clue. The Stellarists plunged deeper into the darkness between the stars, running from something humanity had never encountered before. Behind them, more stars began to flicker in impossible patterns, like a cascade of dying lights. Sarah looked at her console one last time before they jumped to FTL. The message was still there, but now she noticed something else. Embedded in the quantum signature was a set of coordinates and a name. Dr. Lisa Chen, Quantum Physics Division, Earth Defense Force. Her grandmother's name. The Stellarists vanished into FTL space, leaving behind a sector of dying stars, and the growing certainty that humanity's future was darker than anyone had imagined. The Stellarists drifted on minimal power, emergency repairs underway after their desperate FTL jump. Sarah stared through the viewport at the graveyard of ships surrounding them, her breath fogging the plexiglass. "I'm counting at least 30 distinct vessel designs," she reported into her comm unit. "Most appear to be of non-human origin. Time decay suggests the oldest ones have been here for millennia." Commander Rodriguez's voice crackled back. "Any signs of what killed them?" Sarah swept her handheld scanner across the nearest wreck, a massive crystalline structure that might once have been beautiful. "No weapon damage that I can detect, but they all show the same quantum signature we encountered in that energy wave." The repair teams worked in shifts, their magnetic boots clicking against the hull as they patched the damage from their emergency jump. Inside the ship, the air grew colder as they diverted power to essential systems. "Dr. Chen, you need to see this." Lieutenant Park's voice came through her comm, tense with discovery. He was investigating one of the larger derelicts they'd found, an Ark-like vessel big enough to house millions. Sarah pushed off from her observation point, using her suit's thrusters to navigate through the debris field. The massive alien ship loomed before her, its hull covered in writings from at least a dozen different civilizations. Park met her at a breach in the hull, his helmet lights illuminating the darkness within. "We found their bridge, or what's left of it. But it's the logs you need to see." They made their way through corridors designed for beings much larger than humans, their lights revealing empty crew quarters and abandoned common areas. The bridge was a vast chamber with dozens of control stations arranged in concentric circles. "The main AI core is still active," Park said, gesturing to a softly pulsing crystal matrix in the center of the room. "Running on minimal power, but functional. We managed to access some of its records." Sarah connected her tablet to the alien interface they'd rigged. Data streamed across her screen: ship logs, sensor readings, crew manifests. But what caught her attention were the final entries before the ship was abandoned. "Their sun started displaying the same patterns we saw," she whispered, "quantum fluctuations that defied physics. They tried to study it, but..." She trailed off as new data appeared. The AI core suddenly flared to life, its crystal matrix blazing with internal light. Alien symbols projected across the bridge, forming into a holographic face of geometric patterns. "DHTCTE," it announced in a language their translators struggled to process. "Stellar Hunters Present, initiating defense protocols." "We need to leave," Sarah said, but Park was already backing toward the exit. The ship's ancient defense systems activated, emergency barriers slamming down around them. The AI's voice grew more frantic. "They consume that lighty. They feast on inhumanity potential. All STRs will die. All civilizations will end." Robotic sentries emerged from hidden compartments, their weapons charging. Sarah and Park ran, their magnetic boots disengaged as they pushed off walls and debris in the zero gravity. "The hunters," the eye screamed behind them. "They followed you here. They always follow." They barely made it back to their entry point before the first energy blasts hit. Park pulled Sarah through the whole breach as the ancient ship's systems went into meltdown. "Commander," Sarah called through her comm, "we need immediate pickup and emergency jump capability." The Stellaris was already moving to their position, rescue pods deployed. As they were pulled to safety, Sarah looked back at the derelict. Its AI core was overloading, the crystal matrix releasing enough energy to split the massive ship in half. But in that final explosion, her sensors caught something. Coordinates buried deep in the AI's dying transmission. Coordinates to a hidden human research base. Back aboard the Stellaris, Sarah reviewed the data they'd recovered. Every ship in the graveyard told the same story. Civilizations reaching a certain level of quantum technology advancement, followed by their stars displaying impossible behavior. Then extinction. But there was something different about humanity's case. In the AI's records, Earth was marked with a unique symbol, one that translated roughly to self-terminated. "Commander," she said, showing Rodriguez the coordinates. "I think I know where we need to go next, but there's something else you should see." She pulled up her grandmother's personnel file from Earth's databases. Dr. Lisa Chen hadn't just been any quantum physicist. She'd been the lead researcher on a classified project called Stellar Shield. The last entry in her file, dated just before all contact with Earth ceased, read, "May our children forgive us for what we must do to save them." The Stellaris engines hummed to life as they set course for the coordinates, leaving behind a graveyard of dead ships and dying stars, each one a warning of what awaited if they failed to understand humanity's final message. The brown dwarf hung in space like a failed star, its dim red glow barely illuminating the massive research station in orbit around it. The Stellaris approached cautiously, their sensors detecting no signs of active power or life support. "Atmospheric containment is intact in sections B through F," Lieutenant Park reported, "but the station's been running on auxiliary power for decades, at least." Sarah studied the station's layout on her display. The quantum research labs are in Section D. If there are answers about what happened to Earth, they'll be there. Commander Rodriguez assembled a team of 6 for the expedition: Sarah, Park, 2 security officers, and their chief engineer. They docked at an emergency airlock, the station's automated systems barely acknowledging their presence. The corridors were dark and cold, their footsteps echoing in the abandoned halls. Emergency lighting cast everything in a blood-red glow that made navigation disorienting. "These containment chambers," Sarah said, examining a row of massive cylinders that ran the length of one hall. "They're quantum isolation units. Whatever they were studying here, they wanted it completely cut off from normal spacetime. They found the main research lab sealed behind heavy security doors. It took their engineer 20 minutes to bypass the ancient locking mechanism. Inside, they found a scene frozen in time. Workstations still active on emergency power, coffee cups left mid-drink, notes scattered across desks. "Check this out," one of the security officers called. He'd found a functional data terminal. Sarah logged in using her grandmother's credentials, surprised when they still worked. The screen filled with research data and video logs. She selected the most recent entry. Dr. Lisa Chen's face appeared, aged but bearing Sarah's same determined eyes. "Final report on Project Midnight Sun. We've confirmed our worst fears. The entities we captured are just scouts. They're preparing our galaxy for something larger, converting normal matter into quantum fuel through stellar consumption." The video showed footage from one of the containment units, writhing masses of darkness that seemed to absorb light itself. Sensors indicated they were composed of negative quantum probability. "We found a way to fight them," Lisa continued. "The quantum tunneling weapon works. But the cost," she paused, wiping away tears. "The cost is too high. Using it would mean sacrificing Sol itself. We've evacuated as many as we could to the hidden colonies, but billions will still be on Earth when—" An alarm blared through the station's speakers, cutting off the rest of the message. Red warning lights began flashing in the lab. "Containment breach in 62RC, an automated voice announced. "Quantum entities DTCTE outside designated areas." "We need to leave," Rodriguez ordered, but Sarah was already downloading everything she could from the terminal. The security feeds showed it, darkness flowing through the station's corridors like living ink, consuming light wherever it touched. Behind it, metal corroded and electronics failed. They ran, their helmet lights barely penetrating the growing darkness. Sarah's quantum scanner screamed warnings as reality itself began to warp around them. "The nuclear purge system is activating," their engineer shouted. "This whole station is going to vaporize in 10 minutes. They reached a junction when one of the entities surged through a wall like smoke. The security officer closest to it screamed as his suit lights went dark, then his emergency beacon, then his life signs. Park fired his plasma rifle, the blast passing harmlessly through the creature, but the light from the shot seemed to hurt it, making it recoil momentarily. "The emergency flares," Sarah yelled. "Use the flares." They all grabbed emergency flares from their suit packs, the bright magnesium flames creating a corridor of light through the darkness. The entities shrank back, allowing them to run for the airlock. The station's countdown continued as they reached the Stellaris. They undocked with seconds to spare, accelerating hard as the research station detonated behind them. The nuclear fire consumed everything: the station, the entities, and any evidence of what humanity had discovered there. But Sarah had the data, and more importantly, she had coordinates to one of the hidden colonies her grandmother had mentioned. As the Stellaris jumped to FTL, she began analyzing the quantum weapon plans they'd recovered. The design was elegant but horrifying. It would work by turning a star's entire mass into a quantum barrier, creating a permanent dead zone that the entities couldn't cross. But using it meant sacrificing not just the star, but everything within half a light year. Sarah looked out at the stars, wondering how many of them were already dead, consumed by the hunters, and wondering if humanity's greatest achievement would be choosing its own end to save everyone else. The asteroid shouldn't have existed. According to all star charts, this region of space was empty, yet here it was, a massive rock nearly 100 kilometers across, its surface riddled with hidden airlocks and sensor-dampening technology. "They really didn't want to be found," Commander Rodriguez said as the Stellaris approached a concealed docking port. "These stealth systems are more advanced than anything Earth ever officially developed." The port's doors opened silently, revealing a cavernous bay carved directly into the asteroid's heart. As they docked, Sarah noticed something odd about the other ships present. They all bore Earth military markings, but from different time periods, some dating back decades before the silence from Sol. A delegation met them at the airlock. 3 people in pristine Earth Defense Force uniforms that hadn't been standard issue for at least 20 years. Their leader, a tall woman with silver hair, stepped forward. "I'm Admiral Catherine Hayes," she said. "Welcome to Haven Colony. We've been expecting you since the quantum barrier detected your ship's escape from the research station." Sarah felt a chill. "You knew about the entities? About what happened there?" Hayes nodded grimly. "We know everything. We're the children of Earth's quantum physics elite, the ones they evacuated first when the stellar hunters were discovered. Come, there's much to explain." The interior of Haven was a marvel of engineering. Vast chambers had been hollowed out of the asteroid, creating a self-sustaining ecosystem complete with hydroponic farms and recycled atmosphere. But it was the research facilities that took Sarah's breath away. "This is where we continued the work," Hayes explained, leading them through laboratories filled with equipment Sarah had only seen in theoretical papers. After the first hunter was captured in 2445, Earth's best minds realized we needed a contingency plan. They sent us here in waves, over decades, to work on the solution. "The quantum weapon," Sarah said, "the one that requires sacrificing a star." Hayes stopped at a massive view screen showing simulations of stellar physics. "Your grandmother was the one who cracked it. Dr. Lisa Chen discovered that the hunters exist in a quantum state that makes them virtually invulnerable, except when they're feeding on a star's energy." The simulation showed a star collapsing, its energy converting into a barrier that spread across space like a web of light. The weapon uses that moment of vulnerability, turning their own feeding process against them, but it requires the total conversion of a stellar mass. "Sol," Rodriguez whispered, "Earth is planning to sacrifice Sol." "Not planning," a new voice said. They turned to see an elderly man approaching, leaning on a cane. "They already made the choice. We received the confirmation signal 3 days ago. The quantum tunneling device has been activated in Sol's core." Sarah's mind raced. The transmission we received, it wasn't a warning from the future. It was Earth's last message, sent back through time through the quantum barrier itself. Hayes nodded. Time becomes flexible near a stellar conversion event. Earth knew they needed to warn someone, to make sure their sacrifice wasn't in vain. When we detected your ship investigating the silence from Sol, we knew you were the ones they'd reached. An alarm blared through the colony. Red lights began flashing as technicians rushed to their stations. "They're here," the elderly man said, his voice trembling. "The hunters followed your quantum wake." Hayes was already moving. "Get to the command center. We need to evacuate the colony. If they find the weapon plants here." They ran through corridors, suddenly alive with organized chaos as colonists implemented what was clearly a well-rehearsed evacuation plan. In the command center, sensor displays showed multiple quantum anomalies approaching the asteroid. "We've prepared for this," Hayes said, activating defense systems. "We have ships ready to scatter to other colonies. The plans for the weapon must survive." Sarah watched the hunters approach on the screens, their darkness visible even against the void of space. The future of humanity now depended on their ability to preserve Earth's final legacy, not just the weapon plans, but the knowledge of what their civilization had chosen to do to save the galaxy. As Haven's residents rushed to their evacuation ships, Sarah clutched the data core containing her grandmother's research. Soon, the hunters would arrive, searching for the weapon that could stop them, and the scattered remains of humanity would have to decide. Could they honor Earth's sacrifice by finishing what their homeworld had started? The first hunter breached Haven's outer defenses just as Sarah finished copying her grandmother's quantum equations to her portable drive. Around her, the colony's command center had become a chaos of flashing alerts and shouted orders. "Hull breach in Section 7. A technician called out. They're eating through the radiation shielding like it's nothing." Admiral Hayes stood at the central console, coordinating the evacuation with practiced precision. "Status on the civilian ships." "First wave already away. Second wave launching now," her aide reported. "But the hunters are targeting our stealth systems. Once those fail." Sarah knew what that meant. Without the quantum dampeners hiding them, every ship that launched would leave a trail the hunters could follow. She looked down at her grandmother's personal logs, still streaming across her tablet. "Wait," she said, something catching her eye. "These equations, they're not just about the weapon. There's something else here." Before she could explain, darkness poured through a ventilation shaft like liquid shadow. The nearest console exploded as its quantum processors were consumed, circuits withering to dust in seconds. "Fall back to the emergency bunkers," Hayes ordered. "Implementation Protocol Alpha." As they ran through the rapidly deteriorating colony, Sarah's mind raced through the calculations she'd seen. Her grandmother hadn't just designed a weapon. She created a way to see the hunter's true form. They reached a heavily shielded room deep in the asteroid's core. Inside, dozens of screens showed the colony's death as the hunters spread through its halls. But what caught Sarah's attention was the massive device dominating the center of the room. "Is that?" she started. "A prototype," Hayes confirmed. "Not powerful enough to create a barrier, but enough to test the basic principles. We've never dared activate it." Sarah connected her tablet to the nearest console. "These new equations. I think my grandmother found a way to use minimal quantum tunneling to force the hunters into a single state, make them visible." An explosion rocked the bunker. Through the reinforced doors, they could hear the sounds of reality itself being torn apart as the hunters consumed everything in their path. "We have no choice," Commander Rodriguez said. "If we can see them properly, maybe we can fight them." Hayes nodded grimly. "Do it. But understand, the moment we activate any quantum tunneling technology, every hunter in this sector will sense it. We'll have minutes at most." Sarah's fingers flew across the console as she input her grandmother's calculations. The prototype hummed to life, its core beginning to glow with an impossible light that hurt to look at directly. "Quantum field stabilizing," she reported, "preparing for forced state collapse in 3, 2, 1. The device pulsed once, and reality seemed to hiccup. Through the bunker's sensors, they finally saw the hunters as they truly were, massive crystalline structures that existed in multiple dimensions at once, their faceted surfaces reflecting moments of time like broken mirrors. They're made of time itself, Sarah whispered. Crystallized time, consuming quantum energy to maintain their existence in our universe. The revelation came too late. The hunters, sensing the quantum tunneling, converged on the bunker. The prototype's energy signature had drawn them like moths to a flame. All remaining ships launch now. Hayes commanded through the emergency channel. Scatter protocol engaged. You all have your designated coordinates. May Earth's sacrifice light your way. The bunker's doors began to crack as the hunters attacked with renewed fury. They had minutes left, at most. Dr. Chen, Hayes said, handing Sarah a small quantum-locked case. This contains the full weapon specifications and coordinates to all known colonies. You and your crew are designated Sierra Protocol. The others will draw the hunters away while you escape. But Sarah started to protest. No time to argue. Humanity's survival depends on getting that weapon completed. We always knew this day would come. The Stellaris crew rushed through emergency tunnels as Haven's defenders mounted their final stand. Behind them, Sarah heard Hayes ordering the prototype to overload, using its explosion to cover their escape. They reached their ship just as the asteroid began to break apart. As they launched into space, Sarah watched Haven Colony die, its centuries of preparation and sacrifice ending in a final burst of quantum fire that briefly illuminated the hunters' crystalline forms against the void. The Stellaris vanished into FTL space, carrying the legacy of 2 generations of Chen women and the weight of humanity's desperate plan. In her quarters, Sarah opened her grandmother's final log entry, dated just days before Earth activated the quantum weapon in Sol. To whoever finds this, Lisa Chen had written, know that we saw no other choice. The hunters cannot be allowed to complete their portal. What comes through it would consume not just our galaxy, but all of them. Sol's death must light the way to victory, no matter the cost. Sarah looked out at the stars, wondering how many of them were already dead, their lights still traveling through space like messages from the grave. The hunters were following, she knew. But now, finally, humanity could see its enemy. The only question was, would the cure be worse than the disease? The Stellaris drifted through a sector of dead space, its engines running silent. Around them, stars that should have been visible were simply gone. Not dimmed or dying, but completely absent, as if they'd never existed. 17 stellar masses, Lieutenant Park reported from his sensor station, all consumed within the last month, based on the quantum decay patterns. Sarah studied the readings from her modified sensor array, built using her grandmother's equations. The crystalline forms of the hunters were visible now, massive shapes moving through the void, their faceted surfaces reflecting moments of time like broken mirrors. They're not just feeding randomly, she said, noting their movement patterns. They're creating something, a pattern in space-time itself. Commander Rodriguez joined her at the console. What kind of pattern? It looks like. Sarah's voice trailed off as she overlaid the stellar death data. It's a portal. They're converting stellar mass into quantum energy to punch a hole between dimensions. The implications were staggering. Each consumed star added more energy to their effort, widening the breach between universes. And based on the patterns, they were nearly finished. A proximity alarm blared. Hunter, Park shouted, coming up from below. The creature phased through normal space like a shark through water, its crystalline form distorting reality around it. The Stellaris lights flickered as quantum interference disrupted their systems. Emergency power, Rodriguez ordered. Activate the experimental shields. Sarah had modified their defensive systems using the prototype data from Haven. As the quantum shields hummed to life, the hunter recoiled, momentarily forced into a single state of existence. It's working, she said, but look, it's not alone. More hunters emerged from the darkness, their crystalline forms interconnected by threads of consumed stellar energy. They moved with purpose now, herding the Stellaris toward a region of completely dead space. They're coordinating, Park realized. They know we can see them now. Sarah's sensors picked up something massive forming at the center of the dead zone, a tear in space-time itself, glowing with the energy of consumed stars. "That's it," she whispered. "That's their portal, and it's almost complete." Through the breach, they caught glimpses of something moving, shapes so vast and alien that looking at them caused physical pain. The hunters were building a doorway for something far worse than themselves. "We need to get this data to the other colonies," Rodriguez said. "Everyone needs to know what we're really fighting." A hunter struck the ship's shields, causing systems to overload across all decks. They had minutes at most before the quantum interference would overwhelm their defenses. Sarah accessed her grandmother's weapon plans. The quantum barrier, it wouldn't just kill a star. It would create a permanent dead zone that they can't cross. If we could trigger it at the right point, we could seal their portal, Rodriguez finished. But we'd need a star to sacrifice, and we'd have to get past all of them to reach it. The hunters attacked again, their crystalline forms resonating with frequencies that made reality itself shudder. The stellarist shields began to fail. "Navigation," Rodriguez called. "Plot us a course through that debris field. We'll use the quantum wake of the dead stars to mask our jump signature." They ran, the hunters close behind. The ship shuddered as it passed through clouds of quantum decay, the remnants of stars eaten by the crystalline entities. Each passage disrupted their sensors, but also confused the hunters' ability to track them. In her quarters, Sarah finished analyzing the portal data. The hunters needed specific stellar masses arranged in precise patterns to complete their gateway, which meant, "Commander," she called the bridge, "I know where they're going next. I know which star they need to finish the portal." She pulled up the stellar charts, overlaying them with the hunters' pattern. There was only one star that fit their requirements perfectly. One star positioned exactly where they needed it, with exactly the right mass. Sol. Earth hadn't just chosen to sacrifice their sun. They'd been forced to, knowing it was the key to the hunters' plans. The quantum weapon wasn't just about creating a barrier. It was about denying the hunters the final piece they needed. As the stellarists fled through the graveyard of dead stars, Sarah sent out a coded quantum pulse to the scattered colonies. They had to be ready. The hunters wouldn't just follow them now. They'd pursue every human ship with everything they had. Because humanity had done the one thing no other species had managed. They'd found a way to see the hunters' true form. And more importantly, they'd discovered how to stop them. The only question was whether they could reach Sol in time to ensure Earth's sacrifice wasn't in vain. The Sol system was a war zone. Earth's defense fleet engaged the hunters in desperate combat, their weapons modified with quantum resonators that forced the crystalline entities into vulnerable states. But for every hunter they managed to shatter, two more emerged from the growing portal near Jupiter's orbit. The Stellarist dropped out of FTL on the system's edge, its sensors immediately overwhelmed by the scale of the battle. Hundreds of ships, from massive carriers to tiny fighters, fought against the darkness between the stars. Multiple quantum signatures detected, Park reported. They're everywhere, and they're all heading for Sol. Sarah watched the tactical display in horror. The hunters were no longer trying to be subtle. They swarmed through space in their true crystalline forms, their faceted surfaces reflecting the light of dying stars. "Emergency transmission from Earth Defense Command," the comm officer announced. They're asking for authentication codes from Haven Colony. Sarah provided the codes her grandmother had left her. Moments later, Admiral Chen's face appeared on the main screen, her grandfather, looking decades older than his last known photo. "Sarah," he said, relief visible even through the static. "You found Haven. You have the weapon plans." "Yes, but," she glanced at the tactical display, "the evacuation isn't complete. There are still millions on Earth." Her grandfather's face hardened. "We know. We've been trying to buy time, but the hunters, they know what we're planning. They're throwing everything at us now." A massive explosion lit up the space near Venus as a hunter shattered a defense platform. The crystalline entities were converging on Sol itself, their forms distorting as they prepared to feed. "The portal," Sarah said. "They need Sol to complete it. That's why Earth chose to sacrifice the sun, to deny them the final piece. Exactly. Admiral Chen's image flickered as another attack rocked the defense grid. But we need the complete weapon plans to trigger the conversion correctly. Without them, we risk the barrier failing. Commander Rodriguez joined the conversation. How long can you hold them off? Minutes, maybe. We've evacuated about 60% of Earth's population to the colonies, but he was cut off as something massive emerged from the portal. Sarah's sensors struggled to process what they were seeing. It was a hunter, but one larger than any they'd encountered. A crystalline structure the size of a small moon, its surfaces showing not just moments of time, but entire alternate realities. That's their leader, Admiral Chen said grimly. The one we captured all those years ago was just a scout. This is what they really are. The massive hunter began to move toward Sol, its passage distorting space itself. Behind it, the portal pulsed with the energy of 1,000 consumed stars. Sarah, her grandfather's voice was urgent now. We need those weapon plans. Earth's evacuations aren't complete, but if that thing reaches Sol. The choice became brutally clear. They could wait, try to evacuate more people from Earth. But if the hunters consumed Sol, their portal would open fully, and what came through would do more than just consume stars. Sarah looked at the quantum weapon plans, then at the tactical display showing millions of life signs still on Earth. Time seemed to crystallize around her, like she was trapped in one of the hunter's faceted surfaces. Dr. Chen, Rodriguez said softly, we need your decision. The massive hunter was halfway to Sol now, its crystalline form beginning to resonate with the star's quantum frequency. On her screen, Sarah could see evacuation ships still launching from Earth's surface, each one carrying thousands of desperate survivors. But she could also see through the portal glimpses of the void beyond where the hunters came from. It wasn't just empty space, it was the complete absence of reality itself. Her grandmother's final message played in her mind. Sol's death must light the way to victory, no matter the cost. Sarah made her choice. Transmitting weapon plans now, she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. Admiral, begin the conversion sequence. Commander, send word to all evacuation ships. They have 10 minutes to clear the system. The massive hunter sensed what they were doing. It turned its crystalline bulk toward Earth, faceted surfaces blazing with stolen starlight. But it was too late. In Earth's Defense Command Center, Admiral Chen began the final sequence that would turn humanity's home star into their last desperate weapon against the darkness between worlds. Sarah watched the countdown begin, knowing that not everyone would make it out in time. The binary choice, sacrifice millions to save billions, weighed on her like the gravity of a dying star. The hunters swarmed toward Sol in a final desperate rush, but humanity had made its choice long ago, when they first discovered what lurked between the stars. They would not go quietly into the dark. Sol died beautifully. The quantum conversion began at the star's core, spreading outward in waves of impossible light. The hunters tried to feed on it, their crystalline forms resonating with the released energy. But this was no ordinary stellar death. Quantum barrier forming, Sarah reported, her voice hoarse. The conversion is stable. The Stellar is hung at the edge of the Sol system alongside hundreds of other ships, watching humanity's final stand. On the tactical display, the massive hunter leader thrashed in space as Sol's energy turned against it. Look, Park whispered, the portal. The tier in spacetime began to collapse as Sol's mass converted into a quantum barrier. The hunters caught in the conversion zone shattered like broken mirrors, their fragments showing glimpses of other times, other possibilities, before dissolving into nothing. But the cost? Sarah watched the life sign indicators for ships that hadn't made it out in time. Millions of humans caught in the barrier's formation, including her grandfather, who had stayed behind in Earth's Defense Command to ensure the weapon's activation. Message from the colony fleet, the comm officer announced. They're reporting successful jumps to the designated rally points. We got most of them out. Most, but not all. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of every life lost in those final minutes. The quantum barrier expanded through the Sol system like a new kind of light, sealing off the hunter's portal forever. Where Sol had once burned, There was now a sphere of pure quantum energy, impenetrable to the crystalline entities that had threatened all of reality. Multiple contacts, Park called out, coming in from the outer system. Sarah tensed, but these weren't hunters. Ships were appearing from FTL, hundreds of them. Alien vessels of every description, drawn by the quantum pulse of Sol's transformation. We're receiving transmissions, the comm officer reported. They're thanking us. They saw what Earth did, what humanity sacrificed. The alien ships joined the human fleet, their crews sending messages of solidarity and offering aid to the refugees. They had all lost stars to the hunters, all faced the threat of extinction, but humanity had found a way to fight back. New reading from the barrier, Sarah said, checking her sensors. The quantum field, it's affecting local space-time, creating a temporal fold. She understood then what she had to do, what had already been done in another time. Commander, she said, I need to send a message. Rodriguez nodded, understanding. To warn us. To make sure we found Haven, learned the truth. Sarah composed the transmission carefully, knowing it would travel back through the temporal fold created by Sol's death. A warning, a guide, and a promise to the past. We killed our son, she wrote. Find the others. They're hunting us all. She sent the message, completing the loop that had started their journey. The quantum barrier would ensure it reached the Stellaris in the past, just as they began investigating the silence from Earth. Hours later, Sarah stood in the observation deck, watching alien and human ships working together to coordinate refugee operations. The quantum barrier glowed where Sol had once been, a monument to what humanity had chosen to sacrifice. A delegation of alien leaders had requested a meeting. They wanted to know everything. About the quantum weapon, about Haven Colony, about how humans had discovered the hunter's true nature. But they also wanted to help. Already, plans were being made to create more barriers at strategic points, sealing off sectors of space from the hunter's influence. Earth's sacrifice would become a template for survival. Dr. Chen, Rodriguez said, joining her at the viewport. The Colony Council is asking for you. They want to discuss establishing a new home for humanity. Sarah nodded, but her eyes remained on the barrier. In its quantum light, she could almost see other timelines, other possibilities, worlds where the hunters had won, where souls still burned, where different choices had been made. But in this timeline, humanity had chosen to light the way forward, no matter the cost. They had sacrificed their cradle to save the stars themselves, and in the light of other suns, they would build again. Send the council my response, she said, finally turning away from where Earth had been. Tell them I have some ideas about our future, and about how we honor those who gave us this chance. The Stellaris turned away from Sol's last light, joining the fleet of human and alien ships as they moved toward distant stars. Behind them, the quantum barrier stood eternal, a reminder that sometimes the greatest victory is choosing how to face the darkness. And in the void between stars, the light of humanity's sacrifice would shine forever, a beacon of hope in a universe that had learned to fear the dark. The end.